Hello Chums, and welcome to Taming a Monster, the series where I take some of Gran Turismo 7's most ridiculous cars to see if I can tweak them so that a talentless pleb like me can handle them without being killed to death. Like any common ruffian, I'm using a bog standard PlayStation 5 controller, and I have all driver assists turned off, except for ABS. Let's see what car is trying to murder me today. Today we have that car what was in Back to the Future. When released to the public in 1981, customers lamented its high cost and comparatively terrible performance. Even for a car designed in the 1970s, the Volvo 260-derived V6 engine had a rather asthmatic 130 horsepower. We don't have that problem here though, thanks to the wonder of the LS swap. Let's see how a 43-year-old Wedge handles 1000 horsepower hanging out over the back axle like a Beetle. As usual, the car has every upgrade, including the wide body and the body rigidity increase, but none of the settings have yet been tweaked other than the downforce, which is maxed, and the transmission, which has already been adjusted to let the big V8 stretch its legs. The wheels are larger than standard. Increasing the rim size can increase the car's agility slightly, though this can come at the expense of some stability. The DeLorean has a front splitter for front downforce and a rear wing for rear downforce, which I strongly recommend, despite any reservations you may have about the way it looks. If you're interested in learning more about aero, downforce, or any other aspect of tuning your car, I have a series called Tuning for Beginners which covers everything from suspension to differential to the transmission. The chosen track for today was the Road Atlanta circuit. The last time I took a car here was in episode 2 with the Corvette C4, a car that deserves a second attempt. The DeLorean was not as bad as I expected it to be, however please don't mistake that for me saying it's any good, because it isn't. With a Porsche 911-like weight distribution, every time you breathe on the accelerator the front end tries to launch into outer space. Ow, you cock. Then, when you have to stop again, the car wants to spin like a top. Piss off, you discount match Verstappen. At the end of the first lap, the car succeeded in killing me. As usual, my first adjustments were to increase the natural frequency and anti-roll bar stiffness. I set both slightly higher at the rear, due to the car's rear weight bias. The reduction in body roll helped the handling characteristics more than expected. Usually, increasing the natural frequency will make the car flatter through corners, but the overall murderous tendencies usually remain the same. The lift-off oversteer that you would typically expect from a car like this wasn't actually all that bad. It was the power oversteer that was more difficult to keep in check. The next changes were to decrease the front ride height because I have OCD and the car looks like it sits nose high when the body height is actually even. I increased compression so that the car deals with the curbs better. I decreased camber, which should help with the straight line traction. I added some front toe out, which usually helps with lift-off oversteer, and I added some rear toe in to help with power oversteer. The difference was subtle, but the car was slightly better in most ways. The lift-off oversteer was improved and the car felt slightly less quick to transition to power oversteer. It's still by no means easy to drive though, since it still has 1100 horsepower and its engine is in the wrong place. High-speed stability is also an issue. Next up, I adjusted the limited slip differential. Increasing initial torque will slow down the car's reaction times and make it slightly more predictable. I slightly reduced acceleration sensitivity, which can help with power oversteer. I reduced braking sensitivity because it makes the brakes feel sharper. I also decreased front downforce slightly to help with the high-speed stability. That reduction in the front downforce mostly cured the high-speed stability issues. Meanwhile, the initial torque adjustments made the car feel slightly less as if it was on a knife's edge. With the car now mostly sorted, it was time to see how it performed at the Nurburgring. After a few crashes, this is the setup I went with. Adding weight to the front axle increased the overall stability, which allowed me to reduce the initial torque and increase the front downforce, which worked out faster overall. I did already have a target time in mind for this run, and that was 6 minutes 20. Not necessarily to do the car justice, but the engine. The reason is, this is the insanely powerful V8 swap that we should have in everything instead of the stupid LS7 drift car engine. That drift car, and its turbo the size of a continent, sounds and drives terribly, thanks to the mountain of turbo lag you have to wait for before it kicks you up the arse and into the nearest morgue. This Rampage engine, meanwhile, is supercharged, and it delivers its power much more predictably and smoothly, while sounding miles better than the drift car engine. As a result, it is leagues better, despite being 100 horsepower down on the turbo V8. 6 minutes 20 is the time held by the Nissan Silvia S13, which is currently the fastest car I've yet tested with the drift car engine. So, I was hoping this car could beat it, despite having the disadvantage of less downforce, due to there being no option for a rear diffuser. If Polyphony are so obsessed with putting a highly tuned LS motor in everything, this should have been the engine they went with. Maybe I'm just bored of the drift car engine since it's now available in 9 different cars. As for the DeLorean, it's a rather dangerous old thing. You're constantly dancing on the edge of death. But it's just about predictable enough to manage, unlike the Volvo 240 with the drift car engine, which I'm still salty about. In the end, the DeLorean managed a 6 minutes 25, 5 seconds away from the Silvia, though the Silvia did have the downforce advantage. It did beat the Toyota Hiace van with the drift car engine though, although I'm not sure that's much of a bragging right. It also handily beats the drift engine swapped Volvo 240, which isn't saying much. So, that was my attempt to tame a monster. I hope my settings helped, or that you enjoyed this video. Join me next time where I'm driving a car that hopefully has its engine in the correct place. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're feeling particularly generous, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. Take care, and ta-ra.